In this film, we will be exploring one of the Methodist Church's principles for justice. We'll be doing this alongside 8 different Methodists. God desires the flourishing of creation and human community within it. What does this mean to you?
To me, flourishing is about the whole of creation reaching its potential. And the potential for a lot of creation, including for a lot of humanity, is latent. It is there. It is a potential. But injustices prevent that potential being reached. So flourishing is about how does the seed in a parched piece of earth get water? How does an individual who, for whatever reason, finds themselves disadvantaged within a group, receive the support that they need to be treated equally, to open up to flower within that group where, for whatever reason, they've been marginalized. So flourishing is that fullness of life that Jesus talked about. Wherever you shake a stick, if you like, seeing that blossoming happen, that is the potential that's there.
I'm part of a choir that's made up of asylum seekers, refugees, displaced people and allies. And every week when we get together, we play. We play with music, we play with dance, with song, with words. And that to me is a picture of flourishing, because everybody brings their creativity. They try things out. They're comfortable enough to play in a shared space together. And when we come together to make music, to perform, we're doing it in community. And to me, that really looks like flourishing, because we can see people really stretching out to their whole selves, but doing that as a collective, as a community. We are flourishing in who we are, but also together as a community.
Because we faces violence in our society since the Mayans. Then the Spanish came and perpetrated violence. Then we have a civil war that lasts for 12 years. And then we have the violence from the gang. And then we have internalized violence as a practice of the Salvadorian society, which has been hard. But I think that if we are standing in resistance, it is important, because we need to see that a different reality is possible.
Another way of describing balancing the flourishing of people might be the Ubuntu phrase, often used by Desmond Tutu, "I am because you are," which recognises that my life, my existence, my happiness is tied up with yours, and that to get the balance we need to listen to and learn from one another.
Seeking justice requires us to see where others' flourishing is being limited. What does this mean to you?
I think sometimes it's easy to recognise where our actions have limited the flourishing of others, where we've done or said something that perhaps has hurt somebody else. Sometimes it's harder to notice where the systems and the structures that we might benefit from are limiting others.
I think it's so easy to be complicit in inhibiting the flourishing of others. And I'm aware of this every time I chair a meeting at church, that you've got so many different voices around the table. But there are always those, and sadly I'm aware that sometimes I am one of them, who's so eager and confident in making a contribution that without realising it, it's withholding the space required for others to speak, whose voices are not being heard.
I think in some ways, some of that change starts with us thinking about the culture that allows some of this oppression to go on. And actually, sometimes we're complicit in that. If we haven't challenged things, if we haven't called it out or spoken up for people when we've had the opportunities, then we have to consider ourselves complicit, and that feels uncomfortable. But perhaps we recognise that change, really we can only change ourselves. So we start with changing ourselves and hope that influences other people. And we pray, we pray an awful lot and ask God's intervention into these situations and into the hearts and minds of people that really we're very unlikely to get to sit down with.
I think there's lots we can learn about how creation has a voice from Indigenous communities around the world. In Quebec, the Indigenous people around the Magpie River have pursued and got status of rights for the Magpie River because it is an important piece of heritage to them. It represents the voice of their ancestors. They feel connected to the land that they have inherited through the Magpie River. And it's so important to them that it isn't corrupted by climate degradation, by ecological destruction, that they want to make sure it's protected. And I think that gives us a different look into the way that creation has a voice in our decision making, to find creative ways to make sure that we listen to and respect the rights of the land as we make our choices.
I think the best model of flourishing for me is a Holy Communion at its best. It's a table where everyone is welcome and invited, all are included. Everyone receives something, they all receive equal amounts, nobody has to reach out, nobody has to grab anything, but everybody is there. Now we call that a foretaste of the heavenly banquet prepared for all. Actually for me, that's a revelation of the world as it's meant to be. That's what flourishing means.